I want to point to one development that took place recently, just before the ones I've just mentioned. And that is the ruling in the court on the Clico matter. I'm sure if Mr. Imbert's house wasn't burglared and he wasn't going through the trauma he was going through now, he would have used his senior counsel skills to have brought to your attention, for your noting, people of Trinidad and Tobago, what happened with the Clico matter. So I am tonight to do what he would have done for you tonight, which is to talk about where we are with the Clico matter. And to do so, I crave your indulgence for us to take a little walk into Hansard, so you can know from a PNM platform and from the records of Hansard how to appreciate the legal ruling in the Court of Justice Joan Charles last week, or when it was, where the government of Trinidad and Tobago, the government's action was ruled upon by a judge in a case that was filed not against the government, not against the Attorney General as some members in the media are trying to make you believe. The lawsuit that Justice Joan Charles ruled upon the other day was the policyholders group at Clico and some named individual persons, policyholders, versus Kamla Prasad Bisesa. That's the name of the lawsuit. And I want you to take note of that for a reason I will point out to you later. But let's go back to 2010. I just want to crave your indulgence to go back to 2010 and just quote what is on the record. Because you see, the Clico problem came about in this country at a particular time after certain developments. We didn't just fall from the sky. We didn't drop from Mars. For many years, experts in this country were demanding that the people of this country who are in a position to save must save more. They gave us numbers to show, that the level of savings in Trinidad and Tobago was too low. And one of our problems in nation building was that our savings was too low. And we have to increase that savings by putting in place institutions and mechanisms to increase national savings. Two of those institutions were put there by PNM government initiatives. One is the National Insurance Board, which today is a multi-billion-dollar agency that we can't even comprehend not being there. The other is the Unit Trust, which again is a multi-billion-dollar agency, which again we can't even begin to think what life would be like without the Unit Trust. That was part of the nation's response to increasing savings in the country and strengthening our financial position. Those persons who had their own personal and private wealth, they were encouraged to save, because the wanton consumerism that the country was well known and is still known for, experts like Winston Dukaran were telling us we have to save. So those persons went and they looked for savings opportunities. One of those savings opportunities was in the private sector in Clico, a well-known business house in this country. And lots of citizens, tens of thousands of citizens, took their money and went to save and to earn in Clico. Nothing wrong with that. I am saying to you tonight, they did that in response to how they were guided and encouraged, save. And then problems arose on the international arena in 2008. By 2009, Clico got into financial difficulty. They could not have enough money in hand to continue operating the way they were operating, and they came to the government for help, what is called a bailout. Everybody in the parliament and wide across the country understood that if the government sat by and didn't do anything about Clico, or didn't do anything effectively, Clico was so huge in the economy by then that if Clico had collapsed, then the economy of Trinidad and Tobago could have collapsed with it. It came to the parliament where the government said, we are going to intervene and bail out Clico by taking responsibility for their debts and their liabilities in short term with public money, but we're going to hold on to their assets in the interim. We're going to ride this thing out, because these things normally are curves that go up and come down and go up again. I did not hear a single dissenting voice on the opposition side at the time, the Kamalas and the Dukarans and the others, saying don't do that. As a matter of fact, they voted for the measure. And how did the PNM approach it? That this is really a question of finance based on loss of confidence. And if people can have the confidence that the government is coming in and be behind the company with its asset base, difficult as it is, even short of money as it is at the moment, it wouldn't always be so. People wouldn't rush to take the money out of Clico. And if they left their money in there, over time we can ride it out. The assets can pick back up in value as the economy changes and the world economy changes, and over time we can see this hurdle through. And many persons bought into that commitment from the government and began to roll their money over. But of course, under new management, we began to see some problems inside of Clico that we knew about long time, in some quarters, some we didn't know about. But dealing with management shortcomings and infractions and the wider issue of saving a huge economy like Clico to save the national economy, public interest demanded that the government intervene. And there was no dissenting voice in this country. I should say no, that's not correct. There were very few. The vast majority of persons agreed that a bailout was required. There was a general election after that. And the Clico bailout was not a campaign issue. You know why? Because they accepted what the government had done as the best option to save the situation. Cast your mind back to 2010 general election. Who on the UNC and PP platform was objecting to Clico bailout, saying that if you put us into office, we will cancel the bailout? Not one of them. But the minute they got into office, like everything else, they decided to do things differently to what the PNM was doing, including abandoning the bailout and portraying it as something bad that the PNM did. And like the OPV, like the smelter, like the people they fired, like everything they broke when they came into office. Like the destroying angels that came from hell and descended on the earth, they decided to break everything in Trinidad and Tobago that the PNM touched. And we of the opposition were warning them. Listen to some of the warnings they were getting. Permit me to take you back to 2010. And I want to quote from the Hansard, especially for those who felt that the PNM was not being a functioning opposition. This is Colin Mimbert speaking in the Parliament on September 17th. He is the PNM's person who oversees finance. So when he speaks in the Parliament on finance, he speaks for the opposition, not for himself, like the government does. And this is Mimbert speaking in the Parliament. This is where we find ourselves today, 17 September 2010. Remember they came in on May 24th, eh? Budget came in September. This is Mimbert responding in the budget season. This is where we find ourselves today. And there is enough in here for aggrieved depositors to file a class action suit against the Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance. There is enough inside of there, and I do not think this is where we want to go, because the people will be filing this lawsuit and it will transcend political parties. It will be a coalition of the PNM, the UNC, the COP, what is that, MSJ? Everybody, tooth bagay, trade union, credit union, man in the street. So I call on the government to rethink its ill-advised policy. That is the opposition talking to the government, warning the government that what you are doing is going to end up with the state going to court and you wouldn't be able to defend yourself. Of course, they didn't listen. And you go back now a little later on, September 26th, reported in the newspapers as to what is said in Parliament the day before. Government should not play wrong and strong, but accept it made an error and revisit its Clico bailout plan, says opposition MP Colin Mimbert. We go to November. Again, speaking for the PNM, government's poor management of the Clico controversy has set the stage for a lawsuit which could result in billions of loss and a further blow to the economy. He said, what the government has done is made it very easy for policyholders to seek relief from the courts, which he said would rule in their favor. And of course, we could go as far as liquidation of Clico if that ruling goes to its logical conclusion. From the time the policyholders put Clico into liquidation, they will get back every cent, he said, adding that the billions that the government injected to solve the problem would be lost. He said when the lawsuit is filed, he hopes wiser heads would talk some sense into Dukaran and convince him to retreat from the position he has taken and to improve the offer to policyholders. We go to the hand side again. Listen to what Mr. Dukaran tried to say when he was confronted with that. And this, listen carefully, because this is the style of the COP when he tries to defend the UNC. And when he tries to fool you that it has brought new politics, but in fact what it has brought is dishonesty. PNM was there trying to fix the matter based on confidence to allow persons to remain in the Clico business, leave their money there. As it matures over time, who mature will get and who doesn't, who want to roll over can roll over, but you stave off the run. That was the issue. They were changing it to giving everybody $75,000 and you catch them and for 20 years, take it or leave it for the rest of your money. That was their new plan. When Imbert spoke and warned them the way he warned them, as I just quoted there, listen to what Mr. Dukaran had to say. Is the member for Diego Martin Northeast implying that he would have preferred a liquidation option to the option that we have proposed? Mr. Imbert, speaking for the PNM, was not advocating any liquidation option. In fact, the PNM's position was the opposite. Re-establish confidence, instill confidence, people would run to take out the money, and then you fix the problem over a reasonable period of time and so on, and we go forward. When Dukaran was confronted with that as against what they were offering, he raises this red herring, trying to imply that Imbert was saying that he should liquidate the Clico assets and pay the people. Imbert jumped up and said, no. This is what Imbert says. No, I am not saying that at all. What I am saying is that you are forcing policyholders, not all of them, you only need 10. That is what the Insurance Act says, 10 policyholders. How many do we have? 28,000. They just need 10 policyholders to approach the court with respect to this matter, and you're forcing them to do that. That was Imbert explained to Dukaran. Don't try to put it across as though the PNM is advocating liquidation. Well, of course, we all know what happened. They play powerful stupid. They praise themselves up to the new minister arriving, taking credit for fixing the Clico problem. And of course, they were telling you that the court matter would be a waste of time. But they didn't forget to come to Parliament to change the law to try to prevent Clico policyholders from going to court. You remember that? You remember that? If I had the time, I could go into the Hansard and the public record to show you where we pointed out that they would lose the case because the government has been hiding information about the Clico matter from interested parties, including you, the citizen who was paying for the bailout. We went to the Parliament and we asked them specifically, give us an update with the inflection of time, you're managing the thing, tell us what is the story with respect to the assets. But one day you're hearing, we're putting in 5 billion, then it's 10 billion, then it's 15 billion, then it's 20 billion, and we shouldn't put any in. And all they will tell you is an attempt to blame the PNM. But you would have heard the PNM telling them, if you go on with this lying foolishness, when you go to court, you will lose the case largely on non-disclosure on your part. How many of you have had a chance to read the case and the judgment? You know what's happened since? Well, the government lost the case. And they now under law are forced to pay the people. They find themselves in the worst position dealing with the policyholders now. Forced under law to pay them. And what is worse, the case only applies to those who went to the court. So the other tens of thousands will now feel cheated and robbed by a government that lied to them and put them in that situation. Because what the government was telling them is that the previous government made no commitment to you, it cannot be kept, and therefore you have nothing to get. So now they go to court. That argument can't hold water. But I started off by telling you that it had to do with savings. And that was okay up until the PNM left office. The minute this government was called upon to manage the ongoing arrangement, they converted into greed. Is greedy all it was greedy? All it was looking for too much. Crave all, lose all. Stand your bongs. Remember all that? That is how the UNC responded to the Clico problem. And this has nothing to do with any defalcation or misbehavior of any manager in Clico. Eh? That's a separate matter. And of course, that matter itself was under investigation by the central bank and is now ongoing. And if there's wrongdoing, the law will take its course. I'm talking here about how the country responded to a major failure in Clico in Trinidad and Tobago. The same kind of thing happened in America, big America, where they know everything and they do everything right. The American president had a political issue to fight when he intervened to bail out the Detroit motor companies. Because like Trinidad and Tobago, where we said if we allow Clico to fail, the repercussions would be too great for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The other option is better. It's not easy, it's not sweet, but it's the better option. In Detroit, the Democratic president bailed out the industry. Romney get up and say, let Detroit fail. Remember that? Come like a horse whipping his behind after Detroit succeed. Because when Detroit was saved, and Detroit got back to a position of strength, and the next election came around, Romney, like the PP, started saying, I didn't say that. I didn't mean that. That's not what I said. Licks and more licks in America. In the United States, the same thing happened with the Royal Bank of Scotland. The British government determined, like the Trinidad and Tobago government, they couldn't afford to allow the Royal Bank of Scotland to go under. The implications would have been too severe for the British economy. So the British government came in and took over the Royal Bank of Scotland. But you have people in Trinidad and Tobago telling you, PNM's intervention in Clico was bad business. They didn't tell you so in Parliament when the bill came there. They didn't tell you so when the campaign was going on in 2010. But when they got there to do the job, the level of incompetence was glaring. And all the folly has now come in a court matter. Where you now, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, you're facing this. You're facing the government appealing this matter with your money, lawyers making millions, the Attorney General smiling from ear to ear like the cat who had the canary. Because it suits him to pay lawyers to go to because everything is law. Doctors will tell you, medicine will fix everything. Lawyers will tell you, law will fix everything. The churchman will tell you, the Bible will fix everything. But it's never as simple as that. So they're going to appeal. And the first man who said that the government going to appeal, guess who it was? Winston Buchanan. You know why? It is his stewardship. You remember when he left the office after he was fired and put to a pastor in Foreign Affairs? He made a speech in Parliament, his going away speech. He said his crowning glory and satisfaction is the Clico matter. This is it. Once again, the COP, Winston Buchanan, as an alternative, is a resounding, disappointing failure to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. But as they appeal, they will argue their case, and we wait on that. We wait on that. But the bottom line is this. Tonight I call on the Attorney General. You don't have to wait for any appeal. The court has ruled. The court never ruled on Ken Julian at ETEC. The court never ruled on Lincoln Warner in Mason Hall, Tobago. The court never ruled on Ulrich, we call him Buggy, his name just slips me now. Ulrich McNichols. The court never ruled on him. The court never ruled on Wendy Fitzwilliam. But you sue all of them because you, the Attorney General, decide that decisions that they made in business, in the public sector, were such that the state lost money and they're now facing serious lawsuits and their reputation being damaged because you say so. Well, the court has ruled in a matter against Kamla Prasad Bissessa that will cost this country hundreds of millions more when you're suing her.